Welcome to High Stakes. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. On this show, I chat with authors about the moments in their stories that change everything, what's at stake, what it costs, and why we can't look away. From thrillers to romance to sci-fi and beyond. Let's get to it. Joining me today is New York Times, #1 New York Times bestselling author Lee Goldberg to talk about his newest crime fiction novel, Murder by Design. Welcome to the show, Lee.
It's great to be here.
So happy to have you here. I guess I should probably mention you're not only an author, but a best-selling author at that. You're a producer, a TV writer, and you co-own your own publishing house. I
All
take it you like
true.
to I take it you like to stay busy.
I have an expensive family.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
Though
That's
I've
wonderful.
always split my writing career between television and books. It's just been the way for 40 years. My
Yeah.
new TV series, You're Killing Me, just premiered on Acorn, stars Brooke Shields as a writer who solves crimes with the help of
Yeah.
a younger assistant. Sort of Hacks, but with mystery writing. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah.
the comedy show Hacks. I didn't create it.
Yeah.
My
I
good friend
did.
Robin Bernheim did. She and I co-created the Hallmark series Mystery 101 some time ago. But the second episode is streaming now, and will be continuing to stream through early June. And if
Oh,
you guys
great.
keep watching, there'll be a second season.
No, congratulations. That's amazing. Yeah, I don't I can't even fathom what it must be like to have the work that you've done, you're writing to actually hear it, hear somebody say it on the screen. That just must be really special.
It's a collaborative
Yeah.
situation. I mean, there's the story you envision. There's the story that you then break in a room with a bunch of other writers. There's the script you write. Then there's what the director shoots. Then there's what you get in the editing room, and also what all the actors bring to it, and look, and
Yeah.
set designers and costume designers and composers, and so the show that you end up with is often very different from what you originally envisioned. Sometimes better, sometimes worse, sometimes just different. But it's always fascinating to see how a story evolves as all these other really creative people bring their talent to it. It's not
Yeah.
like writing a book. It's writing a script is much more like a blueprint for building a house that all these other different contractors use to do their work. But you generally know the blueprint what you're going to get when the house is finished, though you do have changes and things. So it is a whole different experience. You're
Yeah.
working with a lot of other people, whereas writing a book is very solitary. Also, the
Yeah.
way you tell a story in a book is very different than the way you tell a story for television or film. So it's
Yeah.
different muscles. I can work all day as I am now on a television show, and then in the evening work on a book, and it's exercising a different muscle. It's not like I'm going and doing the same thing. Yes, typing is involved, but other than that, it's very, very different. That's why I could work on the TV show Monk while writing monk novels in the evening because they were two different monks, two different ways of
I'll
telling
be
a story.
darned. Oh wow. Wow. How long did you well, I guess it doesn't really matter how long you did it, but that's really fascinating that you worked on the TV show and you wrote the novels at the same time.
Mhm.
And you're saying they're two different monks that just
Well, two different ways of telling a story. And a novel has a lot more story than an episode
yeah.
of a television show. So you have to delve into different aspects of the character and do more than just solve the
Mm,
crime than
I
you
see
can
what
on
you're
a TV
saying.
show that's very laser focused to the primary story of solving the murder. There's not a lot
Yeah.
of other time for character and other things. So yes, Monk is recognizable in my books as the monk on the TV show, but also different. And also the books are told from Natalie's point of view, so it's funneled through her voice. So much like my new novel, Murder by Design, it's a first-person story told through
Yeah.
the eyes of another person. So you're seeing their perspective. It's colored by their opinions, their biases, their resentments, their longings, their issues, and
Yes.
that makes it different.
Yeah, I really liked how you structured this book. I guess getting to the book since that's what we're here for. So that I don't do any spoilers, why don't you just give us a quick summary about Murder by Design and what it's all about?
Well, Murder by Design is sort of my attempt to do a classic whodunit in the Sherlock Holmes, Nero Wolfe, monk mold, where you have the quirky detective and his or her assistant, which we've seen 1,000 times. And going back to Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple and all that, it's been done to death. And I've done it to death myself, having worked on Diagnosis Murder and Monk and all these other, and You're Killing Me and all these other shows.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring something different to it, to acknowledge the tropes of the genre while also it's satisfying you on that level, but also
Yeah.
subverting them.
Yeah.
Most of these characters, whether it's Sherlock Holmes or Nero Wolfe or Hercule Poirot, they're outsiders. They don't quite fit into society, and they certainly aren't getting laid. They have no sex lives. They're messed up, and their biggest relationship is with their beleaguered assistant, who's always saying, "Oh my God, you're wonderful. Oh, you're so brilliant." And they always have some friend on the force who's just not very bright and doesn't mind being constantly one-upped by this detective. Well, I subverted that. Edison Bixby is drop dead gorgeous. He's ridiculously wealthy. He sleeps with all kinds of women all the time. Women are throwing themselves at him. He's not a social outcast, and he has his superpower is that he sees a designed world around us. We all live in a man-made world, a built world that allows us to control nature to our needs or to control our behavior. And we're oblivious to it. We're sheep moving through these designed spaces using devices and things without realizing how we're being manipulated. And Edison Bixby solves crimes by looking at the design and how the building or the streets or the devices made the crime not only possible but inevitable. And that leads back to who done it. And Bixby doesn't just have this superpower, he also has, as every quirky detective has, a weakness. In his case, when he was an LAPD detective, he was shot in the face. And as a result, has a neurological disorder that has pretty much destroyed his internal censor. He does not think before he speaks. He will say whatever crosses his mind. A fat woman walks by, he'll say, "Boy, she's fat." He will say exactly what he's thinking,
Yeah.
and that gets him into trouble. He's an insurance investigator, so the insurance company has hired an assistant to help clean up his messes before they lead to lawsuits and all these people being offended. And his assistant is a struggling actor named Wally Nash. And we see the Edison Bixby through Wally's experiences, helping Edison Bixby solve crimes and stay out of trouble.
Yeah. It's some books, whenever I'm reading them, I can actually visualize the scenes playing out in my mind. And Murder by Design was one of those books. And I guess I wondered if your skill as a screenwriter, if that transferred over into your novel writing, or have you always been able to write these scenes so vividly like that?
I would, this sounds pompous, and I apologize to you and your audience. I've evolved as a writer. I'm not the same writer I was
Yeah.
30 years ago. I've changed the way I write books, the way I plot books, the way I tell stories. It's been a gradual change, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think it's better to
Yeah.
evolve as a writer and to change rather than to be stuck in one mode. A good example is John Sanford. The guy's in his
Mm,
80s. He's written something like 35 Lucas Davenport novels. Each book is better than the one before. He's a better writer now than he was when he started. I see that evolution in the way he's telling stories. I don't know if he's conscious of it. For me, there was two things shaped the way I am as a writer now. One is exactly what you asked, television. I wanted to capture the same energy and momentum of a television script or a film script in my books.
mm,
And I wanted my books to become sort of like movies in the mind. The writing kind of disappears and you become lost in
right.
what's playing out. So I started writing my books as scripts first, not as things I ever wanted to film or no one ever sees these scripts but me. I write them as screenplays to get the story out of my system, to get it on paper as fast as I can, and to make sure that the story is driven by action and dialogue and not internal monologues, that there's a momentum, but also that it has the same 3 or 4 act structure of a television show or a movie because we've internalized that as the way we like to see stories play out. So it allows me also, I can't sing and I can't dance, but I can feel the rhythm of a book. And each book has its own rhythm, like a
Yeah.
song, its own beat. And by doing a screenplay version of it first, I can find that rhythm. I can find that beat. So I'll get the screenplay written in just a few weeks, and then that becomes my super detailed outline, and I'm basically novelizing my own script. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to find the story, and I'm not married to the dialogue and stuff I wrote in that script, but at least I know the story works. I
Yeah.
know what doesn't play. I know where the problems are. That kind of thing. So yes, television writing has very much influenced how I write books, but something else has influenced how I write books. I wrote 5 novels with Janet Ivanovich, and she's an old dear friend of mine. We had a wonderful time writing those books, and working with her was, I hate it when people use this phrase, a masterclass in being a best-selling writer. I mean,
Yeah.
her point of view is that the writing should disappear because when you call attention to the writing, it reminds people they're reading a book and it pulls them out of the story. So her rule is if you have something clever to say and you can't put it in the mouth or mind of a character, cut it.
Mm.
So when I write, with the exception of Murder by Design, which is first person from Wally Nash's point of view, Edison Bixby's assistant, ordinarily I write third person. So the only time you will hear my authorial voice is in the first few paragraphs of the book. And then I want my writing to disappear. I
Yeah.
want you to forget your reading, and just be so lost in it that you have to be reminded, oh my God, I'm reading a book.
Hmm.
If I have some clever metaphor or detailed description, it just yanks you out and says, oh, look, there's Lee writing. So uh, Janet taught me that. Janet also taught me how to be a leaner writer. I would write what I thought was the tightest writing possible, and she would put big X's on my pages and circle the 3 lines I wrote that said it all. And I didn't need all the other crap. And I didn't real. I mean, it's like I wrote the line. How could I have not seen that all the other
Yeah.
stuff was extraneous? So I learned a lot from that experience and from the Ivanovich experience and working in television. I saw an immediate change, not only in my engagement with readers, but in my sales. As soon as I
Mm.
started writing this way, my sales ticked up and my readership grew, and people became happier with what I was writing. So I was able to get a reinforcement that these changes in how I was writing actually worked, actually had an impact.
Wow. That's amazing. It is so wonderful how one person can, provide that mentorship and influence your writing to the extent that you increased your readership and just your overall, and you're saying the overall enjoyment that the readers had in your books, that just that one person had that kind of
Well, it was
impact.
her, it
And
was my own experience in TV, but also I
yeah,
read a lot.
yeah.
And if I read a book that doesn't work, I ask myself, why is this book boring me? Why am I not caring? Why am I not
Hmm.
invested? And if I read a book that scares me or excites me or depresses me, and that's what the writer's goal is,
Yeah.
I go back and I look, how did the writer achieve that? How did they make me laugh? How did they make me scared? How did they make me sad? And I learn from reading good books and bad books.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
too many books I read, I can see that the writer didn't plot ahead of time. I can see him or her trying to find the story while they're typing and not going back and fixing it. I can see the treading water. You know, by the same token, in a poorly structured mystery, I can see the clues. I can tell that the misdirection isn't working, or the
Yeah.
labored efforts to misdirect. So I've also learned a lot from what I've read. And
Yeah.
and I've also learned a lot from books that have succeeded and not succeeded by other writers. Okay, now why did that book succeed so well? And even if I don't like the book, I won't mention there's an author who's very, very successful, and I've tried reading this person's books, and I can't stand them.
Mm.
But I totally understand why they're successful. There's a readability to the way that person writes that is just like junk food. You
Yeah.
can't stop yourself. Even though I just groan at the plotting and groan at the characters and groan at the dialogue, I can appreciate the skill. And so I learned from that. So I'm always learning. I'm not one of these writers who thinks, "Oh God, I'm so good.
Yeah.
This book is magnificent." A little more magnificent than my last one. I don't think that way. I look at my books going, well, this is the one that will reveal me for the fraud I know I am. This is the one that ends the career. I'm not one of these people who go, God, I'm good. I'm
That
so much better than
imposter
those other
syndrome,
writers.
it's the great motivator, isn't it?
I'm riven with insecurity.
Yeah, it seems most writers are, and but when I hear that other writers are, it always surprises me. It's like, really, you too, kind of
Well,
thing.
haven't you
But
seen, and
everybody,
we won't
yeah.
mention names, but haven't you seen writers who've been very successful and suddenly they just their needle gets stuck and they just keep writing the same book
Mm,
over and over and you can feel
mm,
the lack of inspiration and they lose their contracts and they lose their readers and they just kind of become irrelevant and they don't know
yeah,
why. They just keep writing the same book over and over. I think it's essential to evolve as a writer. I mean, look at my friend Michael Connelly. Look how he's changed Harry Bosch and how he's
yeah,
experimented with other kinds of storytelling and characters and books that keeps him fresh. And that for me, Mike is a example of how I'd like to do my career. That's not to diss my good friend Jan Ivanovic, who has
yeah,
done mostly Stephanie Plum, or my good friend Lee Child, who's done just Reacher. They have found ways to evolve within their series. I just can't imagine myself doing one thing
yeah,
for an extended
yeah.
period.
Well, readers' tastes change, so you almost have to adapt in order to survive. To writing the same thing over and over and over will eventually be a death knell. You'll have your fans that are diehard fans that'll stick with you, but yeah, it makes sense that the readership would start slowly, kind of
But even if you look at television and
tiring.
film, the way TV shows are edited now and movies, they move much faster. I
Hmm.
look at shows I did, I was the executive producer of Diagnosis Murder, and I look back at those episodes and they move so slow. The editing is so slow. I mean, you look at even classic comedies like Return of the Pink Panther and Blazing Saddles, and just look at the way they tell stories and the way the movies are edited. It's just a different. We evolve as viewers. We evolve in the medium and how we portray action. You look at car chases now compared to car chases earlier, and how they're intercut and stuff. How fight scenes are done. The medium is always evolving, and if you don't evolve with it, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you had mentioned that your Edison Bixby, he's a very unfiltered character, and that must have been great fun to write. And then you also have Wally Nash, who seems to view everything through this lens of being an actor, right? So I just, out of curiosity, where did the inspiration for these two characters come from? Was it as you said, you went into it with a very strategic intent to subvert, all of these different tropes, or did they come to you from some other inspiration?
Edison Bixby has been percolating for years, and I don't remember exactly when. And I'm going to mispronounce this man's name, and I apologize ahead of time. But somewhere I stumbled across a quote by Bernard Tashimi, famous architect. I think he was dean of the Columbia School of Architecture, where he wrote, "The best way to understand architecture is to commit a murder." And his thesis was that the environment, that design dictates action and dictates behavior, and that we're shaped by design and we shape design, and you can't separate the two. And he did a big art show in Manhattan where he used Central Park and buildings and did crime scenes and explained how you could deconstruct them. It was a sort of artistic exercise. I just
Hmm.
became fascinated by that whole idea. And I just started reading tons of books about design. Don Norman's The Design of Everyday Things. Paco Underhill's The Call of the Mall. Jeff Manon's Burglar's Guide to the City. All these different ways that design shapes us and we shape design, and how something designed for one. They have the term is affordance. A hammer was designed to hammer nails, but you can use it for a lot of things. You can use it
Yeah.
for murder. You could use it for pounding bread, or a letter opener. You can use it as a screwdriver. You can use it to, scratch the back of your ear. You could use it, whatever you could use as a paperweight. There, people will use objects for things that they weren't designed for, and how design failures can cause. Anyway, I just became fascinated by this, and I thought there has to be a way to use this way of looking at the world as a way of solving crimes. And maybe a turning point for me came. I was researching another book, and I visited this museum in Tasmania that is inside of a mountain. You can't break into it. It's heist proof. but I looked at it in terms of design, the way Edison Bixby didn't exist then. But I
Yeah.
started looking at it the way someone who looks at going against design, going against the way the building wants you to behave, and going against it's screaming at you. You can't break in. We're in a mountain. It's impossible. And as I walked through the museum, I realized I could rob this place. I know exactly how I could pull off a heist in here. And I started casing the building for a heist.
Oh
And I
my
ended up creating a fictional version of that museum and robbing it in my book, Hidden in Smoke. And I would not have been able to do that if I hadn't had that point of view. And then I realized that if a detective then came and investigated that crime, they could deconstruct it and maybe find me by virtue of that. So
yeah.
that was a wake-up call for me. But now I find myself walking into stores and malls and particularly casinos and seeing the way I'm being manipulated. And so then I said, okay, I want to come up with a character who has this ability. What can I do in creating him or her that would satisfy what readers want from that kind of character, but also allow me to poke fun at it, to show, to use a cliche, how the sausage is made. In my book, these characters refer to Nero Wolfe and Sherlock Holmes and are aware of how they fit that paradigm and go against it. I want the audience to be aware of it and the characters to
Yeah.
be aware of it. And then who's going to be my point of view, my narrator? Because this genre is always first person from the assistant's point of view. And there was something in a book by, I think it was Paco Underhill, where he's a cognitive behavior scientist or something like that. And he doesn't use graduate students in the field of that he's in or in psychology or other sciences because they come into it with theories that they want to prove or disprove. They
Mhm.
come with all this education in science. They're looking at it as scientists. He always hires artists, painters, actors, comedians, people who think creatively because they'll look at the way people behave and try to understand their motivations and see beyond the science to the humanity that's driving these people through
Mm.
design. And so I stole that and decided, okay, Edison Bixby's going to hire an actor to be his assistant or people in the arts because they're not going to be trying to argue empirically with him about some science or some theory about behavior. And I've worked with a lot of actors and good ones and bad ones, and it's sort of my chance to kind of make fun of them.
He was a great character.
It's not the first time I've done it. I in the books I wrote
Yeah.
with Janet, I had a character who was an actor who was part of the cons, and that was my favorite character in the books. So
Uh,
it gave me a chance to have some fun, but also to have a slightly unreliable narrator. You kind of
yeah.
wonder if he's seeing the world the way it really is, or maybe he's the one who needs psychological help.
No, he's great. He's great. Well, Bixby's home sounded like a place you'd have to visit 100 times just to absorb it all. There was so much there, so many cool things. And I read in your author's note as far as the inspiration, what you use for inspiration for that house. But I couldn't just enjoy the novelty of it as I was reading it. I had to wonder what poor schmuck had to climb inside the breakfast tree and clean up all the eggshells and the
Yeah.
orange pulp.
Well, the tree I made up. I mean, the tree is sort of a no relation to me, Rube
Yeah,
Goldberg kind of thing from Swiss Family Robinson or Gilligan's Island. The tree with the pulleys and the water and the vines that do all kinds of unusual things.
yeah,
That's fascinated me since I was a kid and I visited the Swiss Family Robinson treehouse at Disneyland. But I also remember the friend of mine's brother-in-law who had that house in the Santa Monica Mountains that inspired me. He had some interesting stuff using water features and things to accomplish goals. Those are elaborate devices. And you look at Gilligan's Island, they always had weird devices like that, involving a bird and water
yeah.
and coconuts and so that I took some liberties. But the house itself, that's a design feature that is Los Angeles in and of itself is a movie set. You drive through LA and you see movie crews taking our streets and making them imaginary locations. We are all actors on a stage in Los
Mhm.
Angeles, even if we are not in the TV industry.
Yeah.
And it's also reflected in some of the architecture here in the quote storybook houses that look like something out of the Brothers Grimm. They're all over, not just LA, they're all over the country, but there's a real a lot of them in Los Angeles, and books have been written about that. So I was sure that people were going to give me a hard time about Edison Bixby's house. So I made sure at the end of the book to say, no, I didn't make this crap up. I mean, exists. You can buy these books about it. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that makes LA special, the sense that we all know we're on camera even if we're not. Every waiter is an actor, a writer, or director. Every street looks familiar because we've seen it in TV pretending to be somewhere else. I can't
Mm.
tell you how many times I've seen the buildings near my house pretending to be Las Vegas or New York or Florida or somewhere in a foreign country. And I've done it myself. I mean, with Diagnosis Murder, and Martial Law and all the shows I've done, I've shot all over Los Angeles. I feel related to. I'll pass a building. Oh yeah, that was a law firm in one of my shows. It was an airport in another one of my shows. I've redressed buildings to be a million things.
I've never really thought about that. That's an interesting perspective on LA. It's that's for somebody who lives very far from LA. It's just not something I ever thought about. So that must be,
Well, you
I
don't
guess,
notice it when you watch movies, but I'll watch a
yeah.
movie that's supposed to be Miami. So that's not Miami. That's Marina Del Rey. Or the one that's
Yeah.
really mind-boggling to me is Hacks.
Uh,
They will drive down a street in Long Beach, but superimpose Las Vegas behind
yeah.
it. But they don't bother to change the street sign that says Ocean Avenue. Or it's just they will constantly take LA streets and just CGI Las Vegas stuff in the background. And it's like to me, it just jumps right out. But I imagine to you in North
Yeah.
Carolina, oh yeah, it's Las Vegas.
No, yeah.
But I see it all the time. But even like
Completely.
I did a lot of shows in Toronto. So for instance, right now, Boston Blue is shot in Toronto. It's supposed to be Boston. I know the locations they're going to. And I'm sure everyone in Toronto is going, that's not Boston. That's Queen Street or whatever. It just,
Yeah. No, it's good. Well, it's good that you're fooling the majority of your viewers, I suppose. So you don't get a lot of uh emails and things like that letting you know.
there's a ton of movie magic. For instance, an episode of Diagnosis Murder, we went to this town, Moore Park, which is far away from the ocean. But all we did was get some establishing shots of Mendocino, and then we cut to the street. And what we've done on the street is we put, beachy people on the street. We put beachwear and we fishing nets, and we add the sound of crashing surf and seagulls, and it's a beach community. And no one knows the difference, even though we're, miles and miles away from the beach. That kind of movie magic is done all the time, and even
Yeah.
worse now with CGI, where they'll take a street and put green screen all around it, and then just put a whole different city, or even a bay at the end of the street
Hmm.
with boats in it. You can do so much now with CGI to make a location seem like somewhere else,
Yeah.
which is
Such a
it is
yeah.
using design to fool you. It's changing the way those streets and everything were laid out to be something else. Um, it's subverting the design of those locations to create an entertainment piece, and that's part of design. It's how can we subvert the design to do the storytelling goal that we want to achieve.
Yeah. Great. Great. Well, on this show, we like to talk about a story stakes. I always joke, love, death, and the fate of the realm. They're all high stakes in the story. But what I'd like to hear your thoughts on are what's personally at stake for, let's say, Wally in your book, since he's your narrator,
Well,
if he
Wally's a
doesn't
failure.
succeed.
I mean,
Yeah.
Wally has not succeeded. He likes to think he has, but he's yet to find his place. And that for him is the journey in this book is where do I fit in? And he may not admit it, but he has found his place. The best role he will ever play is Edison Bixby's assistant. He may not get an Emmy or an Oscar or a Tony Award for it, but he has found what he's the best at, is
Hmm.
acting to help Edison Bixby solve crimes. Because Wally provides insight into the motivations of the people that Edison Bixby deals with, but Wally also plays roles to help Edison Bixby solve the crime. He'll pretend to be a cop. He'll pretend to be other things. So yes, he's finding himself and finding perhaps the most important relationship in his life as well. And same for Edison Bixby. While he may be rich and he may be gorgeous and he may be able to sleep with any woman he meets, he still knows that he has a handicap and that he has become in some ways irrelevant. He may be the greatest detective on earth, but in some ways he's still living in his childhood home. He's still a failure and in Wally he's found a friend. He's found
Yeah.
someone who understands him, someone who will be there for him and won't leave, who's not just there for the money, who
Mhm.
will be honest with him. And that is Edison Bixby is in a sense trying to redeem himself, trying to become relevant again. And that's sort of a weapon used against him in this book. But it's he's not a perfect person. And my view is that stakes are essential and conflict is essential. If you don't have stakes and you don't have conflict, you don't have humor and you don't have drama. And that's why my characters in my books are never perfect people. My most successful books are my Eve Ronin series about the youngest female homicide detective in the history of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. She makes big mistakes. And readers will scream at her, I want to strangle her. What she did was dumb or it was wrong. And I'm like, yes. Yes, I don't want her to be a perfect detective.
Yeah.
I don't want her
Yeah.
to be exceptional. I want her to make dumb mistakes. I want her to learn. I want you to, and same with Edison Bixby. Already some of the reviews are, he's really offensive. Well, of course he is. He has no internal
Supposed
filter.
to be.
He
Yeah.
said some really racist and sexist things. Yes, and let's face it, all of us, no matter how liberal or kind and we want to think we are, we have thoughts we God forbid, we hope no one ever read our minds.
Yeah.
Things we think that we know are inappropriate. Because we're human. We're not perfect. We have biases. We do have cruelty that we in our minds that
Hmm.
we don't actually act upon, that we hold ourselves back. Edison Bixby doesn't.
Yeah. No, he's
And that's a
yeah.
stake for him. He could ruin his career, lose everybody he cares about if he can't control his mouth.
Yes, yes, and which is obviously precisely why they brought Wally in, and it is a really interesting dynamic between the two because, like you said, Wally gives it back to him. I mean, it felt very natural. It didn't feel forced, that he because he felt like he had to stand up for himself at some point, and then with Bixby, I'm sorry, with Wally he's able to just kind of be himself and he can get into these characters and he can give them all these backstories and all these things and Bixby's all on board with that. So it's like they complement each other so well. It's great.
But they're also learning about each other. I don't want to give
Yeah,
away too much, but
right.
Wally thinks the world is a stage and that he's in an episode of Law and Order. So he wants to have that act-ending line at the end of a for the audience that isn't there, and Bixby picks up on it and starts one-upping him, stepping on his lines, and they end up having their own like a married couple, their own banter as they
Yeah.
become intimate, not sexually or anything like that, but intimate with one another. They just bond. They're the kind of people who instantly match,
Yeah.
but they don't realize it because they're always in conflict. But I've been accused, not accused, but reviewers have pointed out that my books, one of the things I keep doing is having unusual partnerships, and I do that on purpose because it brings out the best and worst in characters, brings something for the characters to bounce off of, and it makes it entertaining for me as a writer if there's always somebody there who's going to be a reflection or a bouncing
Mhm.
off point for the protagonist. And I think some writers struggle to find that in their books. A way to show you who the protagonist is in a way that is organic to the story.
Yeah. Well, we'll shift gears just a little bit for our last question here. What is one thing that readers might be surprised to learn about you?
I almost became James Bond. When Daniel Craig left, I said, "I'm sorry, I'm busy writing. I really can't step into that role." Um, there's not a lot that isn't out there already, and my life's kind of an
Yeah.
open book. I think I've said this in interviews before, but it may be surprising to hear that when I was in college, my girlfriend was an editor at Playgirl magazine, and they were based here in the West Coast, and I was hired to write fake letters to the editor for $25 a letter. And then there's I was also their sex advice columnist. Not only did I write the letters to the advice columnist, I gave the advice, and I didn't even know what the hell I was talking about. I just made it up. But this is
Gosh.
edgy journalism. But yeah, it taught me to write in different voices.
Yeah.
Different points of view, and it also taught me in a way to write about sex because I had to talk about, here's my problem with my boyfriend, and the sexual situation we were in that I need your advice on. I can't remember what the name of the advice columnist was, but I would pretend to be this woman giving advice,
That is
which my
amazing.
girlfriend found very funny.
That's a great one. Thank you for that. Well, before we go, can you share what's coming up next?
Well, I'm in the middle of writing the next Edison Bixby novel, but the next book of mine that's coming out is called Split Screen. Is it the seventh or eighth? I'm losing track. Seventh or eighth Eve Ronin novel. It comes out in October, and it's a pivotal novel in the series. Things change quite a bit for her, and like I said, I like to evolve, and the series evolves in a significant way with that book. And also, like as I said, I'm doing the TV series You're Killing Me, starring Brooke Shields, streaming now on Acorn through May and into the middle of June. And with luck, if the show is successful, which I think it is, we'll probably get picked up for a second season, and then I'll be in production on that pretty soon.
All right, great, great, great. All right, folks. Well, be sure to order your copy of Murder by Design today. You can learn more about Lee by visiting his website at leegoldberg.com, where you'll find all of his social media links. Lee, thank you so much for joining me. I knew this was going to be a lot of fun, and you did not disappoint.
Oh,
I really
good.
appreciate your time, and good luck with the new series. And yeah, we'll keep an eye out for for this book coming out next week. I think it is,
Coming
right?
out June 1st, and then
And
Split
then
Screen coming out in October, and
October.
then the
Yeah.
book I'm writing now will come out this time next year.
All right.
So,
Busy guy. It's great. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate it. That's it for today's high stakes story. Follow the show so the next episode lands right in your feed. And if you enjoyed today's chat, a quick rating or review helps new listeners find us. Visit tracydevlyn.com/podcast for show notes and links to today's amazing guest and their fabulous book. High Stakes is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Thanks for listening. Until next time, enjoy the adventure, everyone.